I am live here with Tolosa winemaker Frederick Delivert, and we have very special guests today, Tolosa Vintners Robin and Michelle Baggett. Hello.
Oh, cheers, everybody.
Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So we have a fun episode for you all today. We are located here in the Edna Valley in San Luis Obispo. We're about 4 miles from downtown San Luis Obispo. If you're not familiar with the Edna Valley, it's a transverse valley, a coastal valley. On average, the vines are about 5 miles from the Pacific Ocean. And it's an ideal day. It's warm outside, but the air conditioning is cranking. So if you can see the vines and the trees behind me, the Pacific wind is actually blowing through that transverse valley, keeping the vines nice and cool, which is perfect for Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. And so we're going to be talking about Pinot Noir today, but not just any Pinot Noir. We're going to be talking about Tolosa's flagship, Primera. And Primera, yes, it's a beautiful bottle. The packaging was designed by Tolosa's creative director, Tish Loosely. It's our crown jewel. It's our flagship. And we're going to dive deeper into like, what is a flagship, right? But what's really spectacular about this wine is that it's a conversation starter. Not only does the bottle catch your eye, kind of like a pretty lady walking into a room, as we taste the wine and we dive deeper into the glass, you're going to see how many layers there are and the complexities with this wine. So yeah, let's get started. Robin and Michelle, thank you for joining us. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about the history and the background of Tolosa, where it kind of all started?
Will do. It's kind of good to have you all with us today. And if you notice if you can guess where we are, we're our cabin at Lake Tahoe. We came up here on March 13th, trying to get the last bit of snow. And we goofed around a little bit on the 14th. They went and closed the resorts on the 15th. So we got no skiing in. But we've been here ever since. It snowed so much. Behind us was 4 to 5 feet of snow. I'm not kidding. And now there's nothing. So we've watched the whole transition from winter to spring, and everything's starting to bud now. But going to history, it's kind of cool history. Is I always wanted to follow in the paths of my grandfather and be a cowboy. So when I was practicing law in San Luis Obispo, some ranches became available in Edna Valley, and soon learned that even though you want to be a cowboy and be in the cattle business, it doesn't make much money. And the idea, the Niven family had planted some grapes in the Edna Valley. So my partner, Bob Shivla, and I had a thought that let's plant some grapes. And we did, and that's in the 80s. And at that time, we were just farmers, and mainly Chardonnay was the best crop. And so we were planting more Chardonnay than Pinot. We changed that now. We're getting, Fred will probably tell what the percentage is, but it's probably 35, 65 now. At the time, it was like 90-10. So not much Pinot, even though Bob and I love Pinot. It was a better crop at the time. And then over time, we were also in the custom crush business, and really we started that in the vineyards were planted in the 80s, and we got in the custom crush business in like the late 90s. And it was really as a preventive measure to back us up in case someone didn't want to buy our grapes. We were playing the spot market. We had day jobs, so we could do that. But sometimes if they don't take your grapes, you get nothing in return. So we started with a little custom crush facility where Tolosa is now, and expanded, and we built a big one in San Miguel, which we since sold. But we didn't start really making wine and having a brand until late 98, 99, and didn't even have a tasting room until in the 2000s. So one of the things that I think, looking back, people kind of looked at us as a big processor and didn't take us seriously as ones that really did want to make great Pinot, which we wanted to do, because I always refer to Pinot as the holy grail. And then, as we slowly moved out of the custom crush business, we really started to focus on making some great Pinot and finding spots. I'll share one thing with you. I was never really convinced myself that the Edna Valley was the place where you could make 98-point Pinots like this one is. And but I learned when we brought Fred down, and and John Hofflecher, our winemaker at Alpha Mega, they love the soil because they recognize it's very much like Burgundy. And they started to take advantage of all those sites, and Fred will tell you about it later. But we're now convinced we probably can make some of the best Pinot Noir in California and rival any area, be it Sonoma or Santa Lucia, Santa Rita Hills, or even the Santa Maria Valley. And we're doing that with our single vineyards because you can compare. Now this, and then Fred will tell you, it's 100% from our estate in Edna Ranch, and Fred will show you where the areas are. But I want to stop talking a little bit. You're welcome to ask questions, and let my wife say a little bit. Hi, Michelle. Sorry I talked too much.
No, you're fine. I don't have a whole lot to say other than the fact that I fell in love with Tolosa wines in 2001, and I just love Edna Valley. I love the vineyard. I love San Luis Obispo. I love the coastal influence. I love the terroir. It's true, you could go lick the soil, the limestone, and taste it in this beautiful glass of wine. And I'm more terroir driven with my palate. But I love the winery. I love the hospitality. It's Frederick. It's the product. Collette. It's the people, and it's the beautiful place of Tolosa. It's quite the trinity. So thank you all for joining us today. We feel really blessed to have our 12 o'clock lunch wine with you. Cheers.
Right, liquid lunch. With a beautiful setting, right? So Fred, why don't you tell us a little bit about your approach to Tolosa's flagship Primera and what makes a flagship wine?
Well, that's a pretty simple concept to me. So in a bottle of Primera, I want to show the best Pinot Noir we can make from Edna Ranch. Two important things: Pinot Noir, so I want to get true to the varietal. I want to be true to that varietal that's fairly specific. And then I want to represent the location where we are at and capture what we're getting from that location. So you open a bottle of Primera, you're not gonna get a big wine like people can expect sometimes, but I want you to find power, elegance, and layers. That's what matters to me.
Definitely. Yes, and a little background on the story of Primera. Tolosa is named after San Luis Obispo's most famous landmark, which is the San Luis Obispo Mission de Tolosa. And they really were the first to plant grapes and produce wine in the county. So Tolosa is carrying on the legacy of winemaking that was established by Mission de Tolosa. And Primera is part of that story. So Primera means first, to really connect to that story of the fact that the mission was the first to plant the grapes and make wine for the county. So with that said, about Primera, I think it's time to taste it.
Taste it, yes.
Oh, we've already been tasting
it. Yeah, no, wait, go for it.
So one thing when I was saying, be true to Pinot Noir, when you look at that wine, it's definitely not ink dark, right? Pinot Noir doesn't have to be dark to be a good wine. And that's what I like with that. You can totally see through the glass.
Yeah, very nice ruby color to it. I love the color of Pinot Noir. It's bright. It's like cherry. It's just a pretty, a pretty color.
Very lush nose in that. So that's a 2018. I don't know if you mentioned that. 2018 Primera. Very lush nose, a lot of layers, a lot of red fruits because that's Edna Valley. Edna Valley is, a transverse valley, cool growing area. So red fruit profile, some herbs too.
Fred, I noticed in your notes you say enjoy 2022. It seems pretty good right now in 2020.
It's pretty sexy right now. I agree with you.
Which says a lot about the winemaking, to make a wine that is approachable now in its youth, and then to be able to produce a wine that can cellar for almost 10, 15 years or even more, push it. That's one thing about the Pinot Noirs from the Edna Valley that I love. I love pulling out old Pinot Noirs and seeing how they age in the bottle. And Primera is definitely a wine that you can let it lay down in your cellar, grow with the wine. Also, one of the reasons why we sell our flagship Primera in a 3-pack as well as our single vineyards, You can open one early, see how it does 5 years later, and then even push it 10 to 15 years later.
Yeah, definitely.
That's why you need a case of it, right? Because you can open it for 12 years.
Yeah, that's right. So Robin and Michelle, tell us a little bit about Pinot Noir. What do you love about Pinot Noir, especially since you are also Cabernet Sauvignon wine drinkers? What is it about Pinot that you love?
Well, for me, I think it's my favorite, and when you get a good one, it's the best. I look at it as I think I might have used the words the other way. It's the holy grail. If you can get to this point of making Pinot like this, that's special, and it's the elegance, kind of the understated elegance. I'm always referred to it as like rose petals, you know.
Whoa, rose petals.
I that's one of my favorite.
Mother's Day's coming up. Yeah. So it's my favorite wine, and it's something you can enjoy with all food all the time. You know, cabs are a lot bigger and a lot more. You know, could be more tannic. I'm interested, Fred. There's tannins in here, but there's just not as many, right? How would you explain the tannins?
As a varietal, Pinot actually, if you look at the tannin profiles, Pinot is lacking tannins that you can find in Cabernet and other Bordeaux varietals. So it's a lighter wine in structure, but it doesn't mean there's no tannins. And here we have, I mean, that one is structured, but it's very coated and very subtle, I think.
Yeah, the tannins are very integrated, and everything about the palate, from the flood of acidity to that subtle tannin structure, that mid palate, the length. And so you talked about balance, and that's definitely achieved in Primera. So yeah, and when it comes,
the other thing about Pinot, it's not just how difficult it is to make as a wine once you've harvested it, but growing Pinot Noir has got to be the most difficult grape of all the grapes, varietals.
It's a fairly fragile grape, and it's sensitive to rot. So in a humid climate, like sometimes we have, because we're so close from the ocean, we have a little bit of a rot pressure, and it's also sensitive to heat.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why it's thrived in the coolest area of California, and
Mm-hmm.
being the coastal areas, right? So yeah, it's a challenge to grow and bring that grapes to the level of quality you want, and pick it at the right time to make such a complete wine.
Yeah, I think this is a nice kind of segue into the winemaking. One of our philosophies when it comes to winemaking is that 90% of the winemaking takes place out in the vineyard. So what are some of the steps and techniques that you do out in the vineyard to really strive for that quality grape?
Well, it's a good question, and if you look at the history of Primera, it's only 19, so that's 18/4 vintage,
Mm-hmm.
1950.
Yeah, the first vintage was in 2015.
So the idea, the way we make Primera, I kind of use an analogy with the champagne world, and I call it's a tête de cuvée, right? So tête de cuvée, it's basically the selection of the best lots we have in the cellar. So when we started that idea in 15, I had no experience with Edna Valley, right? So it was just based on taste. But what we did, vintage after vintage, we kept track of what lots ended up in Primera, and therefore what blocks the fruit was coming from. So now, after 5 years, we cannot say that all the same blocks are going into Primera every year, but we have a core of blocks that we know are A quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
And thanks to that, we can adapt the farming. If it's a potential Primera block, then we're gonna go more into details. We're gonna pay more attention to the farming. We're gonna pay more for farming, to do an extra pass just to guarantee that fruit's gonna reach the quality we're after.
Right.
So we're talking about, so the fruit comes from Edna Ranch. It's big property, right? 5 different sections, and very different, even if they're all in a 10-minute radius by driving. You go on to the Hollister section, the closest from the ocean, and then we have block 588. It's a block of Pinot that consistently some lots goes into Primera. Well, that closer to the ocean, we have a very bright red fruit and a very soft mouthfeel.
Okay.
Then if you go to the Storneta range, which is more on the Santa Lucia Highland side,
Eastern side of
eastern
the
side of it, you're correct. It's a little warmer. We have block 596, where we have a different profile of fruit that's very complementary and brings complexity with the previous one. And we have more structure in those lots too. So it's kind of like we have those different colors, and we're painting Primera with those colors.
I like that. Yeah, very nice.
I got a question, like a comment or question for you, Fred. Every year, Fred, Collette, Michelle, and I, we go to the World of Pinot, and we hear from California Pinot winemakers, Oregon, and Burgundy. And half of them, at least, are doing whole custers where they dump the stems in with it. And to me, I go, really? You're going to do that? And so I'm a big anti that. But Fred, what is your thought on all that in clusters?
You know, whole cluster fermentation is part of the Pinot world for sure. As my philosophy, I like the purity of the fruit in Pinot Noir, and if I want more purity of fruit, I need to go away from whole cluster fermentation. It gives you a different style of Pinot, and there's nothing wrong with it. I just like the purity of the destem fruit better. Yeah. And those wines give you the one that you destem. They're more appreciable earlier. Usually, when you do whole cluster, you have to wait a little longer for those wines to really express themselves. While when you destem your fruit, that intensity of the fruit shows earlier.
Definitely.
Well, plus you get all the cobwebs and bugs and stuff there in those clusters.
It's terroir.
Yeah, speaking of terroir, there's many more notes of the Edna Valley that are really shining in this wine. You talked about the cooler climate, that red fruit. Also the acidity, the freshness. It's definitely kind of like the staple, the motif of the Edna Valley.
It's DNA.
The DNA, I like that. And it's definitely something that, Fred, you strive to preserve in your winemakings to really showcase that beautiful acidity. And when you talk California Pinot Noir, there's so many coastal Pinot Noir AVAs out there, Russian River, Santa Lucia Highlands, Santa Maria Valley, the Los Carneros region, and then you have Santa Rita Hills, and then you have Edna Valley. And when you taste the Pinot Noirs from Edna Valley, you really taste that cool climate, that beautiful terroir, that acidity. It really does make the Pinot Noirs from this region so elegant, which is great for food. Something else about the wines from this region is the minerality. Robin, at the beginning of the tasting, you touched a little bit on how the Edna Valley is sometimes considered similar to Burgundy as far as being an ancient seabed. And that's really talking about the soils that we find here in the Edna Valley, those limestone soils, which we refer to as the holy grail for Pinot Noir, especially on that ocean side block that you were talking about, the Hollister section where some of the grapes come from. The soil is pure limestone. And so those are the rocks that Michelle was talking about that you can actually you can taste the minerality. You can taste
you can see it and taste it.
Yeah, you can see it, you can taste it.
Taste it in a glass. And as a reminder, you know, those elevated seabeds are poor, not very fertile soils and very well drained. So the vines are struggling growing in those soils. And when a vine struggles and stressed out, usually the quality of the fruit is better.
It's great to know.
We're actually planting some more Pinot Noir on those blocks right there, right? Currently.
Sorry, what was that, Robin?
We're planting more Pinot Noir around that.
Yeah, so that's something exciting. Talking about the history of Edna Ranch, you guys started to plant in what, early 1990s, probably? 91, yeah. And so there's this, now we're looking at developing some of the oldest blocks that didn't make sense to keep for us. And I'm super excited about that because within those 30 years, we went through, you know, viticulture has just gotten better and better. So we know now that I was talking about straight vines produce better grapes. Well, a way to stress even more the vines is to plant more vines per acre. So now those new blocks, we're almost gonna double the density of the vines per acre. So that's gonna stress them more and hopefully have a very good impact on the fruits. And there's also, French is coming. There's also, a better clone selection that we have with the nurseries. So we know after 30 years, there's a couple of clones that are not really good for Edna. They might be great somewhere else, but Edna, we're like, it's kind of middle of the road. How can we up the game with clones? And so we're planning different clones that are very promising. And when you put the whole package together, tighter density, different clones, I think the future is bright for the whole valley.
That's so fun to learn and see the transformation, and it's just how it's evolving. Yeah, striving for keeping bigger and better.
You have to evolve all the time to up your game.
It's a little bit of live and learn. And one thing about we Americans, we can adapt pretty quick. It took the French a long time to figure all that out. You know?
Because we are slower. No, we don't like changes. That's the truth. Yeah. I do that because my father did it. And why? Because his father was doing that too. Yeah. Different speed.
I have a fun question for you, Robin and Michelle. How do you like to enjoy Primera? What's your ideal evening or situation where you open Primera?
Do you really want me to go there? It's so enjoyable. You know what? I like Primera by itself because it's so elegant. It's like you said, the beautiful woman that walks in the room. It's like I'm sitting with a girlfriend of mine who has so much elegance, so much taste, so much structure, and it's beautiful with food. But this is like I want the one-on-one. I don't want to Zoom with you, Primera. I just want you to myself, best friend. That's what this wine says to me. It says, I just want to be alone with you. And
you're not sharing that wine, are you?
You're not sharing.
I'll be quick. My thought when the question was asked is, you're asking a cattleman that question. Well, he's going to want some rare meat, and so it can be any kind of rare red meat. That's what I think of.
Well, I had a piece of bacon. Robin made some bacon this morning. I'm part of his keto diet, and he opened up the wine. I smelled it. I smelled the bacon. I took a bite of the bacon, and it's some very nice Newski's bacon. And then I tasted the Pinot, so I have to admit that now this might be my breakfast drink with my bacon.
Yeah.
Start your day off with Primera. That's a good day for you. Well, very nice. Well, I want to thank all the viewers who tuned in this afternoon to taste a little Primera with us. So cheers to you.
Cheers.
I also want to remind you to join us on Thursday for Technical Thursday. We'll be going downstairs into Phase 2 cellars to get a nice tour of the lab and meet with Tolosa enologist Madison Frame. And if you join us next Tuesday for Tasting Tuesday, we're going to do a fun comparison between the pure Chardonnay and the 1772 Chardonnay. We'll be looking at the stylistic notes of a Chardonnay fermented in stainless steel, and then a Chardonnay that is barrel fermented. And Primera, if you have to get your hands on Primera, which you do, you can place an order for Primera by calling us at 805-782-0500 or visit our online wine shop and place an order. Robin and Michelle, Fred, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your Primera.
Cheers.
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 Everybody take care.